Section 3.5, Graphing in Slope-Intercept Form. Before we get into slope-intercept form, we need to talk about the idea of slope. And slope is a vocabulary term. Okay, it's a ratio of vertical change to horizontal change. Now, that might not make a whole lot of sense. You might have heard vertical change called rise and horizontal change called run. Okay, and if we're writing a ratio, remember that's the same thing as a fraction. Okay, so it would be vertical change or rise. We're not going to write it with a colon. We're going to write it as a fraction, rise over run. Okay, so you might have heard rise over run. That's talking about slope. Okay, the variable that stands for slope is m, and that is the slope. Okay, it's equal to the rise over the run. It's a ratio of vertical change to horizontal change. Remember, vertical change is rise, horizontal change is run. How we find it now mathematically. Okay, so to find the change in y, we take y2, that's not 1/2, that's y2 minus y1. So that's how you find the rise. And then for the run, it's x2 minus x1. Now, does it matter which is x2, y2, and which one is x1, y1? No, just as long as you just decide, it's going to work out okay. Okay, so if we think about this visually, okay, so if we have 2 points on a graph, so we got those 2 points. We draw our, let's try that again. Let's draw our line through it. Okay, this right here, this is the run, the change in x. This right here, let me go to green, is the rise. Okay, it's the change in y over change in x. So the rise, remember, is y2 minus y1, and then the run, x2 minus x1. Okay, now with slope there are two different types. There are positive slopes and there are negative slopes. Remember, if we're thinking slope as a fraction, okay, or as dividing, there are two different ways you can get a positive answer. If we're dividing, we could take a positive and divide it by a positive. That would give us a positive answer. Or we could take a negative and divide it by another negative. Okay, now if we're thinking slope again, this is a positive change in y. So a positive change in y is up, and then the bottom part of our fraction is the change in x. And if it's a positive change in x, positive changes in x go to the right. Think about a number line. Bigger numbers are always to the right. Whoops, let me go back to purple. Now, if we're thinking negative over negative, a negative change on the y-axis, that is down. Smaller numbers are down. And a negative change on the x-axis, if we think about where are the smaller numbers on the x-axis, that would be to the left. Okay, so for positive slope, it can go in either of these directions, up and to the right or down and to the left. Now, let's think about negative slope. Go back to dividing. What different ways can you get a negative answer when you divide? Well, you could take a positive and divide it by a negative, or you could take a negative and divide it by a positive. Okay, so if we think about positive over negative, again, positive on the y-axis, we've already seen that. Positive on the y, that's going to give us the up direction. Negative on the x, we already saw that here, that would be to the left. Okay, with the other one, negative on the y, that's down. Positive on the x is to the right. Okay, so for negative slope, we can go up and to the left or down and to the right. It looks something like this. So positive slope goes up and to the right or down and to the left. Negative slope goes up and to the left or down and to the right. Okay, those are the two basic types of slope, positive and negative. Okay, so how do we find slope? So find the slope of the line that passes through the given points. Okay, so number one, -4, 3, and 1, 1. If you remember, we have to subtract our y's and our x's. And I said it doesn't matter which one is x2, y2, and which one is x1, y1. You just need to decide. Usually when people find slope, they go from left to right. Okay, so remember the slope is the letter m. We start with our y values first, so I'm going to go 3 minus 1. And then I'm going to do the x values, -4 minus 1. You have to go in the same order for both y's and x's. You can't go 3 minus 1 and then 1 minus -4. It doesn't work that way. If you go left to right for the y's, you have to go left to right for the x's. If you wanted to go the other direction, and I'll give you that in just a second, hopefully what you're going to find is the same answer. Okay, so 3 minus 1 is 2. Negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. So if you want to leave this as 2 over negative 5, perfectly fine with me. If you want to put the negative out front, 2 over 5, that's fine too. Okay, so what if we went the other way? What if we went from right to left? Okay, again, slope is m. Start with your y value, 1, this one. Subtract the other one, minus 3. And then do the x's. 1 minus, now, this negative sign right here does not get skipped. The minus, this subtraction here does not replace this one. You are going to have a double negative here. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 1 minus negative 4 is the same thing as 1 plus positive 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. And what you see, or what I hope you see, is that these two answers are the same. Okay, you can write it as 2 over negative 5, negative 2 over positive 5, or just negative 2 over 5. Okay, either one of those three would be perfectly acceptable. Okay, number 2, let's try another one. Negative 3, negative 1, and 3, 3. I'll go left to right again. So the slope is letter M. Start with your y values, negative 1, minus 3. Then the x values, negative 3, also minus 3. Negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. Negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6. Now, if we have a negative over negative, that would be the same thing as a positive. So that really the minuses cancel each other out, and then we can simplify the fraction. 4/6 simplifies down into 2/3. This would be your final answer for number 2. Number 3, 2, negative 3, and 5, 4. Let's go right to left this time, just to mix things up. So m is equal to, start with your y values, 4, let's try that again, 4 minus negative 3, it's always minus, and if there's a negative, you put another negative sign in there, and then you go to your x values, 5 minus 2, 4 minus negative 3 is the same thing as 4 plus 3, that's 7, 5 minus 2 is 3. Can you simplify 7 over 3? No, and I would say leave it as an improper fraction. You'll see why when we start graphing, but improper fractions, when you get something like this, they are your friend when we're talking slope, and I'll show you why here in just a little bit. All right, let's try one more. Negative 2, 0, and 2, 2. We'll go right to left again just for consistency. So we'll start with our y values. So we'll go 2 minus 0. Then we'll go to the x values. 2 minus negative 2. 2 minus 0 is 2. 2 minus negative 2, same thing as 2 plus 2. That's not 2, that is 4. And then 2 over 4, we can simplify down into 1/2, and that would be your answer. Leave your answer as a fraction. It will make a lot of sense here shortly. All right, let's take a look at something a little different. The points represented by the table lie on a line. What is the slope? Okay, so we're told that these are all on a line, which is important. So really what we can do is we can choose any two of these 4 points here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Choose 2 of them and find the slope. That's all you have to do. I'm going to choose the 2 with the smallest numbers. And remember, it's always change in y over change in x. So I'm going to go that way. So I'm going to do 15 minus 10, do my y values first, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the x values. 4 minus 2. 15 minus 10 is 5. 4 minus 2 is 2. And then 5 over 2 is simplified. That is your answer right there, 5 over 2. All you got to do is pick 2 points, find the slope between them, and that will be your answer. Let's try another one here. Negative 1, 1, 3, and 5 across the top. 2, 2, 2, and 2 across the bottom. Again, just choose 2 points. Let's choose 2 in the middle this time. And I'll go right to left again. So remember, slope is letter M. So we start with our y values first. So it's going to be 2 minus 2. And then our x values, 3 minus 1. 2 minus 2 is 0. 3 minus 1 is 2. Now, if you get 0 on top, 0 divided by anything is going to be just 0. So if you get 0 over 2, or 0 over 10, or 0 over 50, or 0 over negative 5, your answer is always 0. Okay? If you get 0 on top, 0 is your answer. Number 3, 5, 5, 5, 5 across the top, negative 12, negative 9, negative 6, negative 3 on the bottom. We'll use the 2 on the right this time, and we'll go right to left one more time. Remember, slope is the letter M. So we got our y values first, negative 3 minus negative 6. Then our x values, 5 minus 5. So negative 3 minus negative 6, same thing as negative 3 plus 6, which is positive 3. 5 minus 5 is 0. Now, if you try to plug in or try to divide 3 divided by 0 on your calculator, what you're going to get is an error, because you cannot divide by 0. You can't have 0 on the bottom. So if you get something over 0, if you have 0 on the bottom, your answer here is this. It's the word undefined. Okay? You cannot have 0 on the bottom and get an actual number. It's not possible. So when you have 0 on the bottom, like this problem right here, your answer is undefined. If you leave this on your quiz or a test, I'm going to take points off. The answer here is undefined. Okay? You need to write the word undefined. All right, so we've had actually now 4 different types of slopes. Okay? So the first example here was a negative slope. The other 3 were positive, and then here we had a 0. Number 2 was 0, and then we had an undefined slope. So really we've had 4 different types of slopes. So what does slope look like? So we've had positive slopes, we've had negative slopes, negative, and we've talked about these two. Remember, positive goes up and to the right or down and to the left. Negative slopes goes up and to the left or down and to the right. But now we've also had 0 slope and we've had undefined slope. Well, what do these two look like? Well, let's go back to our example that had an answer of 0. So negative 1, 1, 3, and 5, 2, 2, 2, and 2. All of the y values are the same. So if we were going to put these points on the graph, so something like this, okay, let's just assume those are those 4 points. What kind of line does it make? What I hope you notice is that makes a horizontal line. So if you have a slope of 0, then you have a horizontal line. If we think about the undefined answer, what did all of these points have in common? All of the x values were the same. And if all of the x values were the same, so we had something like this, if all of the x values, I'm going to try to get another point or two on here. If all of the x values are the same, what that makes is a vertical line. So if the line is vertical, then the slope is undefined. If the slope is 0 or horizontal, then if the slope is 0, then it's a horizontal line. Undefined is vertical, 0 is horizontal. All right, so the title of the section was Graphing in Slope-Intercept Form. We haven't talked about slope-intercept form yet, so let's do that. Slope-intercept form is a vocabulary term. Slope-intercept form is this: y equals m, and I'm going to put that in color, x plus, and I'm going to get another color in here, b. Okay, y equals mx plus b. I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's good to review it or get a refresher on it. The two key pieces here are m and b. M, well, if it's called slope-intercept form, and it's convenient that we have an m, what does m stand for? Well, we've used it the entire section here. M is equal to the slope. Okay. B, now this is a little different. If it's called slope-intercept form, it's probably going to tell us the slope and the y-intercept. Oops, let's make it int. Y-int, that's B. Okay, so it's telling you the slope and the y-intercept. It's called slope-intercept form for a reason. Math people are not creative. Okay, if it's got the slope and a y-intercept in it, they're going to call it slope-intercept form. All right, so let's work on identifying slope and y-intercept of equations. Okay, number 1 here. Let's go with y equals 3x plus 4. Okay, it's written exactly like slope-intercept form, so we need to identify 2 things. We need the slope and we need the y-intercept. Let's start with the slope. Okay, slope is the letter m. M is equal to, well, if you look up here, slope is the number right in front of x. So in this case, that would be 3. The y-intercept is that number on the end, b, that is 4. That's your answer for number 1. The slope is 3 and the y-intercept is 4. Let's try another one here. Number 2. Whoops, get rid of that line there. Number 2, let's go with y equals 6.5. Just the number 6.5. Okay, we still need 2 answers. M equals, B equals. The slope, remember, it's the number in front of x, but there's a problem here. we don't have an x. So if there's no x, there's no number in front of x, that means the slope is, whoops, go back to the pen, the slope is 0. That would be like y equals 0x plus 6.5. Okay, so if we write it like this, then it's very easy to see what the y-intercept is. That would be 6.5. If the slope is 0, what that means is that the graph of this line is a horizontal line through the y value of 6.5. Let's try another one here. Number 3, this one's a little more complicated. Negative 5x minus y is equal to negative 2. Okay? Before we can go identifying the slope and y-intercept, we have to have the equation in slope-intercept form. We need y to be positive and by itself. Right now, in number 3, it is not. Okay, so we need to move things around. We need to move, let's move the 5x that way by adding 5x to both sides. So we're left with negative y, because these cancel, but we still have that negative sign. Negative y equals positive 5x minus 2. Okay, to get rid of the negative, we need to divide both sides by negative 1. We need to divide everything by negative 1. Dividing everything by negative 1 effectively flips all of the signs. Okay, so 5x divided by negative 1 is negative 5x. Negative 2 divided by negative 1 is positive 2. Once we are in slope-intercept form, now we can go ahead and answer our questions. What's the slope? That's negative 5, the number in front of x. The y-intercept, the number without an x at all, that is 2. Okay, let's try one more here. Number 4. X plus 4y is equal to negative 10. Again, we need to get y by itself, so we'll subtract x from both sides. 4y is equal to negative x minus 10. Then we need to divide everything by 4. Okay, so y equals negative x divided by 4. That's negative 1x divided by 4. We can do it as a fraction. Negative 1/4 x. Negative 10 divided by 4 is, well, it's a simplified fraction, or we can simplify it. 5/2. Once we get there, go ahead and identify your slope as negative 1/4 and your y-intercept as negative 5/2. All right, now that we've seen slope-intercept form, let's jump into graphing in slope-intercept form. Here are your 4 steps. Number 1, write the equation in slope-intercept form if necessary, and that's what we did here in examples 3 and 4. Okay. Number 2, plot the y-intercept. Number 3, use the slope to find a second point, and I'll show you how to do that. And then number 4, the easiest one, draw the line. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Number 1, graph the equation. Let's go with y equals 4x minus 4. All right, let's start by identifying slope and y-intercept, because this is already in slope-intercept form. Y is already by itself. Okay, so the slope is 4. The y-intercept is negative 4. And remember, slope is a fraction. If it's a whole number, we can make it a fraction by putting it over 1. And that's going to come in handy here in just 1 second. All right, so when we graph this, and let me bring in some graph paper here. If we're going to graph this, let me draw our axis here. Okay, we start at the y-intercept of negative 4. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Negative 4 is right here. We graph it on the y-axis. Now, the slope, we use the slope, because now we're into step 3, use the slope to find a second point. Okay, our slope is 4/1. So this is a positive change in y and a positive change in x. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 units up, and then a positive 1 is 1 point over. Okay, so our second point is going to be right there. Now, when you use your slope to find the second point, it is from the y-intercept. It is not from the origin. Okay, so we're going to go up 4, right 1, make your second point, and then you can jump into step 4, which is real easy. Draw the line. Looks like that. Okay, and we'll extend that way. That would be the graph of number 1. Let's try another one here. Number 2. Let's go 3x plus y is equal to negative 3. This is not in slope-intercept form, so we need to put it in slope-intercept form first. I'm going to do that by subtracting 3x from both sides. Y is equal to negative 3x minus 3. Go ahead, identify your slope and y-intercept. Your slope is negative 3. Your y-intercept also negative 3. And let's go ahead and graph here. So let me slide this down. Move that down. So my y-intercept is where we start, negative 3. So 1, 2, 3 is right there. Slope, or y-intercept of negative 3. Now the slope, again, turn it into a fraction. So it's a negative over a positive. So negative change in y is down. positive change in x is to the right. So 1, 2, 3, and then 1 to the right. So our second point is right there. Instead of going down and to the right, the other way we could have gone, remember, would be up and to the left. So if you wanted to, you could go 1, 2, 3 up and 1 left. Do you have to go both directions? No, you do not have to. All you need is 2 points, and then you can go ahead and graph the line. Okay, if you took pre-algebra last year, some of this should look familiar. We did talk about graphing in slope-intercept form. Let's try another one here. Number 3. X plus 2y is equal to 6. Okay, again, we need it in slope-intercept form first, so let's move the x over. So 2y is equal to negative x plus 6. Got to subtract x from both sides, and then we need to divide both sides by 2. So we'll have y equals, let's see, negative x divided by 2, negative 1x divided by 2 would be negative 1/2 x, and then 6 divided by 2 is positive 3. Okay, again, identify your slope, that's negative 1/2. Identify your y-intercept, positive 3. Okay, so when we go to graph here, let me draw in my x and y axis. Start at your y-intercept of positive 3. Now your slope is already a fraction, negative 1/2. All you need to do is assign the negative to be one of those two. So I'm going to go negative 1 over 2, because what that tells me is I need to go down on the y-axis and then positive right, or positive to the right on the x. Okay, so I'm going to go down 1 and then 1, 2 to the right, find my second point. If I wanted to go the other direction, go up 1 and then 1, 2 to the left, and you make your other point. Again, you don't have to do both directions, just one is fine. Okay, and then you go your line. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. One more problem. Here's story problem. A linear function f models a relationship in which the dependent variable increases 2 units for every 1 unit that the independent variable increases. Graph f when f of 0 is equal to 1. Write the function and identify the slope and y-intercept. All right, let's start by figuring out, there's a lot going on here. Dependent variable. Dependent variable is usually y, okay? Independent variable, that's x, okay? So let's write this down. So the dependent variable is y. The independent variable, is x. Okay, so we've stated that. Now this part where it says the dependent variable increases for 2 units for every 1 that the independent variable increases. So there's a lot going on there. Okay, looks like that. Okay, so if the dependent variable increases 2 units for every independent variable, for every 1 that the independent variable increases, that's telling us our slope. Okay, our slope, remember it's change in y, so change in y over change in x. Okay, it says the dependent variable increases 2 units, so it goes up by 2 for every 1 that the independent increases, so 2 over 1, or 2. Okay, so identify the slope, we've done that. Now this f of 0 equals 1. If you remember from function notation, what that means is that the x value is 0 and the y value is 1. And if the x value is 0, that means we're on the y-axis. This is the y-intercept. Y-intercept is right there. It's 1, positive 1. Okay, so in order to write this in slope-intercept form, because we did the y-intercept in green, we've identified the slope. The last thing we need to do is write the function. Remember, slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. In order to write it in slope-intercept form, we need the slope, we need the y-intercept. We have both. Okay, so we got y equals, we got our slope of 2x plus our y-intercept of 1. But this isn't quite correct because we have this this f of 0. If it's written in function notation, if your question is written in function notation, your answer needs to be in function notation. The only difference between xy notation and function notation is the f. Okay, remember f of x is the same thing as y, so we just need to replace y with f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. That is your final answer. The last thing in the direction said graph f. So we can do that. We know that our function here, 2x plus 1, we can do this, not a problem. Okay, let's draw our XY axis. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. And let's plot some points. We got to start with our y-intercept of 1, our slope of 2, or 2 over 1. So we go up 2, 1, 2, right 1, and we have our second point. Once we have our second point, we can draw the line. And that would be the graph of f of x equals 2x plus 1.